The story begins with a girl harvesting potatoes on a secret farm deep in the forest. She felt a sense of pride in how well her crops had grown. As she filled her bucket, preparing to head back, she felt her hard work had finally paid off. She recalled how hidden this farmland was, and how she hadn't always cherished it so much. 14 years ago, her mother, the owner of the Espancia estate, passed away. The estate should have been hers, but the Duchess of Basellan illegally seized the property. Soon after, the Duke remarried and replaced all the servants with his own people. Eventually, the girl was completely abandoned. She was trapped in a forest, her only connection to the outside world being the Vieira Monastery. While the monastery sent food, it was barely edible, and she nearly starved. By feigning illness, she managed to reduce their surveillance and barely survived. Despite the hardships, she found ways to live and felt grateful for this small piece of tranquility. But one day, she saw two figures approaching from afar, most likely from the monastery. Startled and nervous, she hurried back to her cabin. Unsure of their intentions, Aloys quickly donned her foul-smelling cloak upon returning home. Soon, the two men arrived at her door, telling her they had brought food. As she opened the door, the stench from the cloak was almost unbearable for them. Aloys feigned weakness, thanking them weakly. Overwhelmed by the smell, they quickly left, barely saying a word. After they were gone, Aloys angrily threw the cloak aside, muttering that she would never get used to the rotting smell. She sat on her bed and began to ponder. Usually, only one person delivered food and left quickly. Two people was unusual. She wondered if her father had sent them and felt the need to find out why. That night, Aloys snuck into the monastery kitchen. She was pleased to find it even messier than usual, and took the opportunity to grab some butter and sugar. She thought to herself that while she could find fruits, vegetables, and meat in the forest, things like sugar, butter, flour, and milk were impossible to obtain without stealing from the monastery. As Aloys quietly gathered supplies in the kitchen, she suddenly heard footsteps approaching. Panicked, she forced herself to stay calm. She wondered if it was the monks responsible for cleaning. Two monks entered, chatting as they cleaned. One asked who had made the abbot so happy, and the other replied that a large donation had left him overjoyed. Aloys eavesdropped, thinking it was unexpected that they cared about such things. The two continued talking, and Aloys listened intently. One of the monks mentioned a girl abandoned in a cabin, referring to Miss Aloys. The other dismissively said she was just a dying woman, left to rot in the countryside monastery. Then came the shocking news. Her father had apparently been killed. Aloys was stunned. Her father was dead. One monk added that this made Aloys the new countess. But when asked again about the mysterious visitor, the other explained that the deceased countess had sent someone. Hearing this, Aloys immediately thought of Camilla. They continued their discussion, saying that legally, the inheritance procedures had to be completed within a week of the count's death, otherwise it would cause legal disputes. The monks speculated that the plan was probably to keep Aloys hidden here for a week. One said it was foolish. They hadn't cared about her for so long, so why bother now? But the large donation made everything clear. They probably wanted to quietly dispose of her here, discreetly. Hearing this, Aloys was filled with fear. She realized with horror that the true purpose of this sudden visit and donation was to silently eliminate her. They were here to kill her. Her thoughts returned to the day she was abandoned. Back then, she was just a child, cried her heart out, shocked and helpless, unable to even do something as small as mending a broken window. She remembered how adults used to take care of everything for her. Over time, she grew up and accepted her fate of abandonment and loneliness. Hunger forced her into the forest to gather fruits. In a cabin that once belonged to a hunter, she found some books and diaries, learning how to survive. It was then that she discovered a fertile piece of land, cultivated it into farmland, and planted eggplants, beans, and potatoes, freeing herself from a monotonous diet of black bread. Back in the present, Aloys hurriedly packed her belongings. She knew she couldn't die here, not after having endured so much. Food was delivered every 2 days, and it had been delivered today. The next delivery wouldn't be until tomorrow. This was her only chance to escape. She recalled how she had thought about running away before, but felt it wouldn't change her fate. But she still hoped to return to the capital one day. Memories of her mother flooded back. Little Aloys ran excitedly towards her, and her mother embraced her tenderly. Her mother told her that one day she would inherit this beautiful garden and that she must protect it. When Aloys expressed doubt, her mother confidently reassured her, saying she would certainly succeed because she was her daughter. In the memory, Aloys's mother removed her necklace and lovingly handed it to Aloys, urging her to always cherish it. She said that whenever Aloys faced difficulties, she should wear the necklace, look at the garden, and pray, and she would find comfort and strength. Back in the present, Aloys, with a heavy heart, put on the necklace. Thinking of her mother, she clutched the necklace tightly, realizing that if someone intended to kill her tomorrow, they would soon discover her disappearance. She knew she didn't have much time. If the monastery sent someone, she would be caught quickly. But then she remembered the man warning the others not to approach until he returned, which gave her a chance to escape. She ran, past fields full of vegetables ready for harvest, and stopped, realizing with a surge of emotion that the harvest season was approaching. She wondered sadly if she would ever be able to plant and enjoy these crops again. Taking one last look at her field, she bid it farewell. Aloys stood at the edge of the cliff, feeling dizzy from the height. She thought to herself that no one would think she would escape from here. When she first read about this hidden path in the hunter's diary, she could hardly believe it, but there was indeed a way down the cliff. She threw down the rope and, though trembling with fear, bravely began to climb down. She recalled the terror she felt the first time she made the climb. Back then, she even cried. When the monastery didn't give her decent food, she would secretly climb down the cliff and go to the village. There, she sold the books she had carried down, slowly learning to haggle. With this, she earned money and bought the crops and simple supplies she needed to survive. Now, descending the cliff again, she firmly reminded herself that this was not the time to give up. Although her hands were sore and shaking when she reached the bottom, she clenched her fists, filled with determination. This was just the beginning. Meanwhile, an assassin disguised as a monk approached her cabin. Thinking she was asleep, he pushed the door open, only to fall into a trap Aloys had set, screaming in pain. Injured and startled by the sudden counterattack. The next morning, Aloys finally returned to the capital on horseback, the place where her mother had once lived. She strolled through the bustling marketplace, noticing it was more crowded than before, probably because of the war. She recalled how 5 years ago, the orcs from the north had crossed the Eternal Mountains and invaded, catching the Empire off guard. The Empire lost most of its northern territories, causing a large number of refugees to flood into the capital. To cope with the situation, the Empire rapidly expanded its army, and people from various noble families joined. The most famous among them was Haken, the king of mercenaries. He always covered his face and had been renowned for over 30 years. Judging by his long career, Aloys guessed he must be in his 50s. A year ago, the Emperor, to commend Haken and others for their achievements, bestowed titles and honors upon them. Although the war was over, Aloys could still feel the aftershocks. The recovery of the North had only just begun, and many refugees remained in the capital. She grew anxious, realizing that her family's mansion was likely controlled by Camilla's people, and she didn't know what to do next. According to imperial law, only married individuals were considered legal adults. If the parents died, adult children had to formally declare their intention to inherit. Otherwise, the title would be transferred to the surviving spouse. It had been exactly 1 week since her father's death. Aloys realized she had to get married immediately to inherit the estate, but the conditions were stringent. First, the groom had to be a nobleman. Second, he had to be single. And third, the marriage registration had to be completed within 3 hours, before 6 o'clock in the afternoon. With no other choice, Aloys headed to the mercenary guild, believing that with enough money, anything could be found there. She only had 50 gold coins and intended to hire someone with a good reputation who wasn't greedy. Just then, she heard someone in the guild shout 10,000 gold coins. Curiosity drove her to eavesdrop. She overheard 2 men discussing a bounty. The reward was unusually high for a 22-year-old girl with blonde hair and green eyes who had recently been seen at a monastery. Aloys was terrified, realizing they were looking for her. The 2 men continued discussing finding Aloys. Walking toward the exit, she quickly hid understanding that Camilla must be behind it. Seeing the marriage registration office about to close, Aloys panicked, praying desperately, begging heaven to grant her a husband immediately. Suddenly, a man fell from the sky, landing right in front of Aloys, startling and confusing her. She wondered if he had actually fallen from the heavens. Moments later, a bald, furious man chased after him, yelling about money he owed. He accused the fallen man of posing as a baron and bragging about killing orcs in the war, threatening to squeeze the money out of him. Aloys watched nervously, suspecting a gambling debt, and decided to leave before she got involved. As Aloys tried to slip away, the bald man noticed her and nervously stopped her. She claimed to be just passing by. The bald man told her to leave, but the man who fell from the sky suddenly grabbed her cloak. He clung to her, calling her darling and begging her not to go. Aloys froze, bewildered, trying to tell him he had the wrong person. But the man insisted everything he did was for her. The bald man grew suspicious, asking if Aloys was his wife. Aloys panicked and nervously denied it. But the bald man said if she really was his wife, she should pay his 50 gold coin debt. Aloys stared in shock, internally protesting that she had nothing to do with this man, let alone shared a bed with him. She tried again to explain she wasn't his wife, but the man continued to cling to her, dramatically calling her his wife and urging her to pay the 50 gold coins, asking if she was really going to abandon him. Aloys angrily denied knowing him and tried to pull free, but was taken aback by his composure and strength. Then, he whispered in her ear, asking if she had 50 gold coins. Could she lend them to him for a moment? He promised to return them. Aloys was bewildered, feeling a strange, compelling power in his voice. As the bald man approached them suspiciously, Aloys braced herself. Just then, a small flower mysteriously landed on the bald man's head, stopping him in his tracks. Aloys opened her eyes and looked closely at the man, realizing he was unexpectedly handsome. To her shock, the man pulled out her coin purse and handed it to the bald man. Aloys cried out, having no idea when he had taken it. The bald man happily counted the 50 gold coins and even suggested Aloys could work for them to earn more. Looking at her face, the mysterious man flatly refused, kissing Aloys' hand and calling her his only love. Aloys was both confused and flustered, especially when, upon hearing a whistle, the man declared the debt settled and pulled her away. In a quiet alley, he apologized for involving her and said he would return the money if she came home with him. In the West District, but as the bells chimed, Aloys grew anxious. She was running out of time. The man, noticing her distraction, asked if she was even listening. Aloys urgently questioned the mysterious man, asking if he was truly a nobleman. He casually admitted to being an heir. This shocked her further. She furiously grabbed his collar, demanding he return her 50 gold coins, implying he could pay with his body if he had no money. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Camilla lay on the sofa, sighing heavily. A maid reminded her not to wrinkle her dress, but Camilla dismissed it, saying she wouldn't wear it after the funeral. She ordered the maid to fetch her wine, complaining she hadn't had a drink in a week. She also mentioned guests arriving soon and instructed the maid to bring them in immediately. As the guests arrived, the scene flashed back to a few days prior. The president of the Chamber of Commerce visited Camilla with a business proposition. He offered his condolences for her loss, then got down to business, stating her late father's mansion was prime real estate in the capital. He formally offered to buy the entire estate, including the top floor of Espencia. He promised a substantial sum after the funeral. Camilla agreed to sign the contract and sell the estate as soon as the funeral was over, considering it a good deal. After all, the top floor, once an imperial treasure, was now just an ordinary shop. She also congratulated herself on her clever move of sending Aloys to the convent. Since Aloys hadn't shown up, Camilla assumed she had forfeited her inheritance. Confident that the Basellan family would never discover her true intentions, Camilla planned to sell everything and live a life of luxury in the south. However, she grew impatient, wondering why the merchants hadn't arrived yet. Hearing a carriage, Camilla hurried out, assuming it was them. But to her surprise, it was Aloys who stepped out, and the servants mistook her for a guest. They tried to send her away, but Aloys firmly declared she was there to reclaim what was rightfully hers. A maid recognized her, stunned by her distinctive hair and eyes, addressing her as Miss Aloys. Camilla was visibly annoyed and shocked. She berated Aloys, accusing her of trying to claim the inheritance before marriage, emphasizing that it was against the law. But Aloys confidently produced a marriage certificate and introduced her husband, the same mysterious man from before, Lakshman. Camilla was completely speechless. Suspicious of Aloys' sudden appearance with a husband, she guessed that Aloys must have learned about the inheritance law somehow. She questioned how a girl raised in a convent could possibly be married, especially to a man from the wild north. She was full of suspicion towards Lakshman, calling him suspicious and demanding he remove his mask, believing there must be something wrong with his face. Aloys tried to defend him, but Camilla pressed her. Finally, Lakshman removed his mask, shocking both Camilla and the servants with his unexpectedly handsome features. Aloys was equally surprised, blushing at his sudden affectionate gesture. He put his arm around her, suggesting they have some time alone, which surprised Aloys even more, as he hadn't been like this during their formal meeting. A flashback revealed how Aloys and Lakshman met. She had been hesitant about marrying for money, thinking it a terrible idea. But Lakshman teased her about how she had been chasing him for a debt before. Despite her reservations, Lakshman calmly signed the marriage certificate. He reminded her that they could divorce after the inheritance issue was resolved. Aloys recalled how she had originally intended to choose her husband carefully, but ended up picking one up off the street. Back in the present, Aloys boldly announced that their marriage was recognized by the government, meaning she was now the rightful Earl of Basellan and the legal owner of the estate. Camilla was speechless, unable to accept this turn of events. Just then, another carriage arrived. Camilla, thinking it was the guest she was expecting, eagerly went to greet them. Lakshman reacted immediately upon seeing the newcomers, recognizing them as formidable mercenaries. However, he said that they didn't know him. The president of the Chamber of Commerce stepped out of the carriage and was warmly welcomed by Camilla. But she quickly brought up a matter, hinting at Aloys' sudden arrival. When Aloys questioned the man's identity, he bluntly stated they were there to see Earl Camilla. Aloys firmly introduced herself as Aloys Espencia Basellan, declaring herself the new Earl of Basellan. Camilla thought angrily that if Aloys had arrived just a moment later, the contract would have been signed smoothly. The president of the Chamber of Commerce also expressed regret, but the atmosphere quickly changed. One of the mercenaries slyly suggested that perhaps the new Earl arrived after the contract was signed or hadn't arrived at all. The mercenaries drew their swords and approached Aloys, clearly frightening her. But Lakshman calmly and protectively turned to her, offering to deal with the threat. He asked if she needed him to get rid of them. Aloys, startled by his confidence, questioned how he could possibly handle them all alone. However, Lakshman was unconcerned, saying nothing could faze him. Aloys, realizing the danger ahead, thanked Lakshman for his support, but insisted she wouldn't ask for his help. She declared that this fight was hers. Lakshman gently questioned her decision, reminding her that as her husband, he was already involved, whether she liked it or not. Tension rose as Camilla ordered the mercenaries to seize Aloys and Lakshman, although Aloys protested, demanding they release Lakshman as he had nothing to do with this. Lakshman smiled and corrected her, saying that as her husband, he was certainly involved. His calm demeanor and charming smile stunned everyone, including Aloys and the mercenaries. Lakshman playfully told Aloys that while he was touched by her concern, her words had stung a little. Aloys, flustered and blushing, wondered what was going on with this man. Camilla appeared annoyed, taunting Aloys, saying that her 14 years in the convent hadn't done her any good. She criticized Aloys' stubborn gaze, saying it hadn't changed since childhood, and began boasting about the contract she had signed with the merchant. Camilla sneered, explaining that the deal was nothing more than her sorrowfully selling the estate due to her husband's death. She accused Aloys' deceased father of foolishly clinging to the estate just to maintain his pride. Now, she said, those foolish dreams were over. Her husband was dead, and Aloys was too late. Camilla sneered that perhaps when Aloys opened her eyes again, she could reunite with the dead. Aloys, with a calm and confident smile, responded to Camilla's taunts, revealing that she came prepared, aware of her situation, and knowing that no one would support her. Camilla, caught off guard by Aloys's unwavering confidence, was left with a bewildered expression. Suddenly, a royal carriage arrived, drawing everyone's attention. Camilla paled upon seeing the insignia, realizing it was from the palace. She urgently ordered the mercenaries to release Aloys and Lakshman, which they immediately obeyed. Camilla grew increasingly anxious, fearing the repercussions of Aloys revealing what had just transpired. Marcus Lexon, the Imperial Minister of Finance, stepped out of the carriage. His appearance shocked Camilla, who couldn't understand why such an important figure would be present. Lexon, too, seemed momentarily disconcerted upon recognizing Lakshman. As Lexon paused, Aloys politely asked the assembled crowd to leave. She referred to them as uninvited guests and thanked Lexon. To everyone's further astonishment, Lexon bowed in return. He announced that Aloys had pledged to donate all her territories and wealth, including the estate. Camilla was left speechless by Aloys's declaration. She couldn't fathom Aloys giving away her entire inheritance, including the vast lands, jewels, and priceless artwork, donated to the nation. Panic welled within Camilla as she realized the estate and everything in it might now be beyond her reach. Meanwhile, Aloys recalled her journey to the capital, confessing her hesitation until she devised a plan to entrust everything to someone Camilla wouldn't dare challenge. Someone truly powerful. Minister Lexon acknowledged the historical significance of Aloys's donation and apologized for the abrupt visit. Aloys humbly thanked him, praising his swift action, and formally entrusted everything to him. She also reminded him of a prior condition. Lexon readily agreed. He would donate all the wealth, but with one condition. The estate and gardens must be preserved. And so, Aloys silently fulfilled a promise she had once made. Camilla, the president, and their cohorts were rendered speechless by Aloys's audacious move. That evening, Aloys sought out Lakshman, apologizing for keeping him waiting. Lakshman reassured her it was all right, knowing she must have been busy. Aloys gently insisted that no matter how busy, she would always make time for the person who saved her. She then handed Lakshman a bag as payment for his earlier assistance. The bag contained valuables she had retrieved from Camilla's room. Minister Lexon had allowed her to keep them. She also told him he needn't return the 50 gold coins she had given him earlier. Lakshman hesitantly commented on her generosity, but Aloys insisted it was nothing compared to what he had done for her. None of this would have been possible without his help. She thanked him sincerely. A brief flashback showed Lakshman stepping in to fight for her when she was cornered by the mercenaries. Aloys confessed that while Camilla terrified her, Lakshman's confident words had brought a smile to her face. She hadn't realized it then, but that moment had given her courage. For that, she was truly grateful. Lakshman watched her silently, captivated by her warmth and smile. Composing himself, Lakshman asked Aloys what she planned to do next, now that she had given everything away. Aloys calmly replied that while everyone assumed she had lost everything, she had actually protected what truly mattered. The estate and gardens would now be forever protected by the Empire. She felt there was no better way to safeguard them. Lexon asked if she regretted giving up so much, as it had all been hers. Aloys admitted to wavering, but knew that trying to hold on to everything would only put her in danger. She assured him she hadn't lost everything. She had taken care of herself in her own way. When Lakshman inquired about her future plans, Aloys said she intended to leave the capital for a while. Just then, someone called out to her, addressing her as Countess Aloys. As she departed, Aloys waved to Lakshman, reminding him to be careful and arranging to meet him on Monday at 3 p.m. in front of the government building. She playfully added in a low voice that they still had things to do. Upon returning to his lodgings, Lakshman was greeted by a subordinate who had been waiting for him. Surprised, Lakshman inquired if the casino mission had gone smoothly. The man respectfully confirmed they had successfully gathered all the evidence, thanking Lakshman for his assistance and addressing him as Your Highness. Realizing his slip-up, he quickly apologized, but Lakshman brushed it off, instead asking if he had reported his whereabouts to his brother, the king, as he had suspected. The man nervously apologized, explaining he was under strict orders from the king to report everything. Lakshman reassured him it was all right, confirming he had completed the task his brother had given him. He then told the man he no longer needed to stand guard and ordered him to leave, stating he would report to the king himself. When a man hesitated, Lakshman firmly stated it wasn't a request. This prompted his anxious subordinate to quickly take action. After a long and eventful day, Lakshman lay in bed, exhausted. He thought back over everything that had happened, especially the marriage that existed only on paper. He found the situation rather amusing and admitted he'd never expected things to turn out this way. A flashback showed him cleverly distracting the guards earlier that day, flirting with a lady, and creating a commotion to sneak upstairs. He chuckled, remembering the chaotic scene. Back in the present, Lakshman pondered the strange coincidence of meeting Elrose in that place. Her shining golden hair had caught his eye for a moment. He laughed inwardly at his own childish thoughts and quickly dismissed them. He then decided to return to his homeland soon, despite the Emperor's constant desire for him to stay in the capital. He wondered how his brother would react to the news of his sham marriage. Lakshman reminded himself it was all an act. If it were real, Elrose would be by his side now, sharing their wedding night. Embarrassed by the thought, he quickly stopped himself, telling himself to wash up and go to sleep. Meanwhile, Elrose stood alone, recalling the surreal experience, getting married and then almost immediately divorced. She smiled wryly, realizing she had always been alone. Ever since she was abandoned in that small cottage as a child, she had been. She remembered her mother telling her to wear a special necklace and pray in the garden when times were tough. She softly admitted that she didn't feel particularly distressed now, but she didn't know what to do next. The next morning, Lakshman fidgeted restlessly, wondering why he had to wait so long. He considered taking a walk in the garden, but decided against it, afraid of attracting attention. His thoughts drifted to the mother he had never met. As a child, he had asked his father what she looked like. His father described her as a radiant and gentle woman, beautiful and kind. Smiling, he had drawn a picture of her for Lakshman. The memory, filled with laughter and warmth, remained etched in Lakshman's heart. But following that memory was another, his father becoming withdrawn and silent after the Emperor's death, wanting only solitude. That moment became a turning point in Lakshman's childhood, deepening his connection to the emotions of both his past and present. Lakshman's father revealed a life-altering truth. His mother was the previous emperor, Lucretia. After purging the traitors, she had met Lakshman's father, and they lived a secluded life, giving birth to Lakshman. His father gave Lakshman a necklace, telling him to use it only when he needed help, but warning him never to go to the Empire. War broke out soon after, and Haken, Lakshman's father, was gravely wounded while rescuing civilians. In a heartbreaking moment, Haken declared Lakshman the new mercenary king. With his dying breath, Lakshman took his father's banner, led the mercenaries to safety, evacuating the villagers, and revealed his father's death only to his closest companions. At that time, Lakshman had intended to quietly retire after the war, but fate had other plans. Later, upon meeting the Emperor, Lakshman bowed respectfully. The Emperor treated him casually, reminding him there was no need for such formality, but Lakshman insisted, saying he couldn't just wave to the Emperor. Despite their close relationship, during the final battle between the Imperial Army and the Suan tribe, the Emperor was surrounded by enemy forces and found himself in grave danger. While the Imperial Army initially had the upper hand, a sudden flanking maneuver by the enemy turned the tide of the battle. At that critical juncture, Lakshman, disguised as Haken, bravely charged into the battlefield to protect the Emperor. His courage inspired awe in all who witnessed it. In that moment, the Emperor recognized Lakshman instantly, even before seeing his identifying necklace. Back in the present, Lakshman recalled that moment, still amazed that the Emperor had recognized him so quickly beneath his disguise. Someone asked him what he was thinking about. Lakshman recalled their first encounter on the battlefield, marveling at how the Emperor had recognized him at a glance. The Emperor explained that it was because the late Empress often spoke of Lakshman. In the memory, the Empress told the young Emperor that while she hadn't been able to see Lakshman grow up, she believed he resembled his father. At his birth, as they talked, the Emperor told Lakshman that even without any prior clues, he would have recognized him instantly. Lakshman joked that royalty indeed possessed beastly sharp instincts. The Emperor retorted that Lakshman had managed to find him amidst the chaos of the battlefield as well. He also pointed out that Lakshman still addressed him as Your Majesty. Lakshman knew in his heart that he would never call the Emperor brother. He understood that his sudden appearance as the brother of a childless monarch would inevitably spark political suspicion. To those who knew the truth, he might even be seen as a potential traitor. Changing the subject, the Emperor commended Lakshman for his help in resolving the gambling den issue, saying it made things much easier. But when he brought up Lakshman's marriage, Lakshman smiled faintly, thinking that the matter was already settled, and assured the Emperor there was nothing to worry about. The Emperor, however, expressed concern about Lakshman's age, pointing out that he was 26, 6 years older than the Empire's average marrying age. Lakshman felt a twinge of annoyance as the Emperor enthusiastically announced arrangements for him to meet all eligible women, starting the very next day, and insisted that Lakshman stay at the palace to facilitate the process. Shocked by this sudden arrangement, Lakshman blurted out, calling the Emperor brother, which greatly pleased the Emperor. Lakshman then quickly fabricated a story about already having someone in his heart. The Emperor, surprised, asked why he had never mentioned her before. Lakshman explained that it was because the Emperor would have immediately demanded to meet her, which would be too much pressure for her. He added that Northerners are fiercely loyal once their heart is set, hoping the Emperor would understand his caution. Lakshman breathed a sigh of relief inwardly, feeling his lie had gone smoothly, and the Emperor seemed to have accepted it. When the Emperor asked for the name of his supposed partner, Lakshman, caught off guard, blurted out the name Elrose. The Emperor, curious, bombarded him with questions about her personality, appearance, how they met, and even her favorite food. Lakshman did his best to concoct believable answers. But the Emperor, worried about putting pressure on her, decided to personally visit Elrose instead of having her come to the palace. Lakshman panicked at this unexpected turn of events, realizing he needed to extricate himself quickly. Meanwhile, Elrose waited outside the mansion, feeling uneasy. She worried about arriving too early and recalled how uncomfortable the mansion had become since the divorce. Having completed the necessary donation procedures, she wished for someone to accompany her. But due to the secrecy of the divorce and her distrust of the people in the mansion, she decided to face it alone, even though she couldn't even drink a glass of water there in peace. While contemplating whether to wait until things calmed down before finalizing the divorce, Elrose was suddenly attacked from behind. Camilla stealthily approached and injected some kind of drug into Elrose's neck. Elrose, shocked and in pain, only realized it was Camilla at the last moment. As the drug took effect, Elrose desperately tried to stay conscious, but fear overwhelmed her, especially the thought that if she died now, suspicion might fall on Lakshman. After all, they had just registered their marriage. Camilla taunted her, mentioning the men she sent returning injured, and ordered her men to take Elrose away. As Elrose gradually lost consciousness, she was lifted by the mercenaries and carried into a desolate alley. They began to worry if they had overdosed her, as she was completely unresponsive. Camilla cruelly suggested chopping off Elrose's limbs to wake her up. Lakshman suddenly appeared, ordering them to release his wife. Camilla, shocked by his appearance, tried to taunt him, believing him unarmed and powerless, and ordered the mercenaries to attack. But Lakshman knocked one of them down with a single punch, terrifying the rest. He declared with a smile that disguising himself as a mercenary was his specialty. Later that night, Elrose regained consciousness. She felt panicked and confused by her surroundings, and the memory of Camilla further fueled her anxiety. But Lakshman gently comforted her and brought her food. He explained that the antidote she took was strong and she needed to eat. The doctor warned that she might experience dizziness until the toxins were completely purged. As Elrose gradually regained her senses, feeling dizzy, she asked Lakshman about Camilla and the mercenaries. Lakshman calmly explained that they were currently at his hotel. When he saw her being dragged into the alley, he immediately took action. In truth, he confronted Camilla directly, scaring her off and neutralizing the threat, then ordered his aides to clean up the mess. He then took the unconscious Elrose to the nearest hospital. However, to avoid worrying her, Lakshman fabricated a story, saying he called the guards, who then arrested Camilla and her mercenaries for attempted kidnapping. Elrose questioned how they were caught so easily, and Lakshman added that there was infighting amongst the group, and even Camilla was poisoned by her own mercenaries. Elrose thanked him, and he simply stated it was his duty as her husband. Lakshman reminded Elrose to eat while the food was warm. She began to eat, complimenting the taste, and then turned the conversation to her future plans. Although Camilla was now imprisoned, her greedy relatives were starting to cause trouble again. someone requested an audience, seeking to reclaim the property Alyssa had donated. According to imperial law, they had the right to do so within a year. After understanding the situation, Aloys agreed that she should leave the capital. When Lakshman asked if she had enough money for the journey, Aloys assured him she was fine, explaining that some officials from the treasury had discreetly returned a portion of her hidden assets before the mansion inspection. In a flashback, Alyssa's necklace glowed mysteriously, pointing towards a painting. Upon inspecting the painting, she discovered a small hole hidden behind it, containing a letter from her mother. The letter revealed a secret, the combination to a safe and the existence of emergency funds. These funds were distributed across 5 locations. Her mother apologized in the letter, saying it wasn't much, but Alyssa was shocked to discover it contained 100,000 gold coins. It was enough to buy a house in a large city and live comfortably for a lifetime. She resolved to stay put for at least a year, keeping this discovery to herself. When Lakshman asked where she planned to go, Aloys frankly admitted she didn't know yet, just wanted to get as far away as possible. Seeing Aloys' hesitation about her destination, Lakshman hesitantly suggested she could go to his hometown. He regretted saying it almost immediately, assuming she would refuse. Unexpectedly, Aloys expressed genuine interest, curiously asking about the place. Lakshman described it as a peaceful village in the north, far from the capital and its conflicts. He shared that it was a quiet, small place with fertile land where anything could grow. During harvest season, the wheat fields turned golden and the village children enjoyed fishing in the nearby river. As Lakshman described his hometown, Aloys thought it was the perfect secluded haven she desired, remote, peaceful, and undisturbed by nobles. After all, North Alba had only recently been incorporated into the empire. But her curiosity grew, and she asked Lakshman why he was so kind to her. She pointed out that their marriage was one of convenience, yet he always looked out for her. He even offered her a safe place to escape. Slightly uneasy, she asked if he was this kind to every woman. Lakshman, caught off guard, firmly denied it. He confessed he had something to ask her, then mustered the courage to request Aloys become his partner. In his hometown, partner implied a sacred lifelong bond, inseparable even by death. Aloys explained that in the north, many avoided formal partnerships because of the lifelong commitment. Some even chose to raise children together without a formal relationship. Lakshman hurriedly clarified that he wasn't asking for a true sacred partnership, just for her to pretend. Aloys, realizing his intention, questioned if he was lying about having a partner because he didn't want to marry, yet was being pressured by his half-brother in the empire, and that he was using her name casually simply because of her appearance. Lakshman apologetically admitted it was true, explaining that his half-brother was persistent, and it would be difficult to explain further if he investigated. Aloys understood his predicament. Aloys agreed to continue the pretense of being married for the time being, to avoid suspicion from his greedy relatives. She thought to herself, smiling, that she only needed to keep it up for a few more years. They shook hands, agreeing to cooperate as temporary partners. While traveling in the carriage, Lakshman silently pondered their situation. Now with the marriage certificate and the emperor's letter, his half-brother shouldn't bother them anymore. Aloys, noticing his silence, called out to him with concern. Thinking he was worried about the carriage fare, she offered to help pay, feeling it might be too expensive for him. Lakshman reassured her he was fine, lying that he was just calculating their journey. He thought to himself that Aloys still saw him as a poor mercenary, unaware that his entire hometown and the surrounding lands were actually his territory. He had accepted the land to live peacefully with his comrades, tired of war and the title of king of mercenaries. Now, that fertile land brought a heavy tax burden, even though he felt the emperor's reward was too generous. Lakshman chose not to explain, touched by Aloys' genuine concern, a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. Lakshman and Aloys stopped at an inn for the night. Aloys, uncomfortable from the journey, confessed that she almost died along the way. Lakshman handed her water, reminding her how excited she was at the start of their journey. Aloys explained that, having lived under constant stress in the capital, this was the first time she could sit peacefully in a carriage and enjoy the scenery, thanking Lakshman with a smile. After drinking the water, they entered the inn. Aloys requested a room for the night, including dinner and breakfast. The innkeeper asked if one room would be enough. Ilas was about to refuse, but Lakesham suddenly interrupted, insisting they share a room. Ilas was shocked, and the manager apologized profusely, saying he hadn't realized they were a couple. Ilas then turned to Lakesham, speechless and surprised by his unexpected move. Finally, Lakesham told the manager that they were newlyweds and couldn't bear to be apart even for an hour. He then pulled Ilas away, saying she was tired. The manager cheerfully commented that they were young and could order dinner later. Lakesham pulled a bewildered Ilas along, affectionately calling her darling as they headed to their room. But upon entering, they were both stunned by the romantic decorations of roses and candles, as if it were their honeymoon night. A blushing Ilas grabbed a candlestick and angrily accused him, saying all men are wolves. A flustered Lakesham quickly explained that he had seen someone with a spider tattoo in the lobby, a mark of a habitual thief. He warned that if they stayed in separate rooms, her room would likely be targeted tonight. Hearing this, Ilas calmed down, understanding his intentions were to protect her. Lakesham silently wondered if Ilas would find this too frightening. He recalled how some thieves specifically targeted and killed mercenaries or robbed their rooms at night. While the mercenary group, led by the mercenary king Haken, was often praised for its contributions, Lakesham's own image was quite different, often described as greedy, rude, and a northern troublemaker. Although these insults didn't truly hurt him, they sometimes annoyed him. Just then, Ilas suddenly asked him if there were any other tattoo markings among mercenaries besides the spider. She mentioned seeing dragon and lion tattoos on the way to the inn and was curious what they represented. Lakesham asked her in surprise, "Aren't you afraid of mercenaries?" Ilas frankly replied that she was indeed a little afraid, but reminded him that he was also a mercenary. She added that it was because of mercenaries like him and the mercenary king that the Empire won the war. Her words momentarily stunned Lakesham, touching his heart. Ilas quickly changed the subject, urging Lakesham with childlike curiosity to explain the meaning of the other tattoos, showing her interest in him and a growing closeness. That night, Ilas slept soundly while Lakesham sat watching her, muttering to himself. Surprised by how easily she let down her guard, he gently scolded her for being careless and wondered where he should sleep. He remembered her earlier insistence that he take the bed because the sofa was too worn out. He hesitated about sleeping with her, intending only to keep his distance. But the situation felt strange to him, considering it was supposedly their wedding night, even if it wasn't real. As he was lost in thought, Ilas turned over in her sleep, moving closer to him, making Lakesham freeze, incredibly embarrassed. He briefly wondered if she was doing it on purpose, but quickly realized she was just murmuring mother in her sleep. Lakesham sighed, thinking it would be better to sleep in separate rooms starting tomorrow. Otherwise, he was afraid he wouldn't be able to sleep all night. Meanwhile, Ilas dreamt of her childhood, recalling her mother warning her that all men were wolves. The young Ilas in the dream questioned this statement, thinking softly to herself, but Lakesham isn't a wolf. Her mother's voice continued to advise her to be careful when choosing a husband. The next morning, Ilas woke up from a deep sleep, her mind still on the dream and this sudden marriage. She smelled the lingering scent on the blanket, soap and a faint body fragrance, and realized it wasn't hers as she hadn't bathed last night. Feeling a little shy, she decided to go to the bathroom to freshen up. Just then, Lakesham entered the room carrying breakfast, surprised to see she was already awake. Ilas gratefully thanked him for the breakfast, saying it smelled delicious. Lakesham then mentioned his plan to go to the pawn shop to exchange the imperial gold coin she had given him, explaining that the northern regions still use their own currency, drachmas. Ilas was intrigued and excitedly expressed her desire to go and see, making Lakesham smile inwardly, having already anticipated her reaction. As they talked, Ilas hesitantly brought up the matter of where she would stay after arriving at his home. Lakesham thoughtfully replied that he planned to introduce her as the daughter of his deceased savior, orphaned and with nowhere to go, which would make it easier for her to be accepted in the village. Ilas was relieved to hear this and happily agreed. Lakesham also told her that she could choose any of the houses left vacant by the war once they arrived, and he would help her fix it up. Ilas silently recalled that Lakesham had only asked for a marriage certificate and hadn't intended to continue pretending to be a couple in the village. However, in her heart, she secretly hoped that perhaps they could still live together. Later, the two went to the money exchange, where the owner greeted them warmly, asking what currency they wanted to exchange and reminding them that he didn't accept stolen goods. Lakshman requested to exchange 10 imperial gold coins for northern currency. The owner offered an exchange rate of 16 drachma copper coins for 1 imperial gold coin. Lakshman was clearly displeased. He knew the usual rate was 20 and suspected they were being lowballed because of their appearance. Seeing Aloys's exhaustion, however, he decided against arguing or seeking another exchange, accepting the rate as it was still enough for their travel expenses. Just as Lakshman agreed to the unfair rate, Aloys suddenly interjected tearfully, emotionally asking if they were really going to exchange her mother's keepsakes. Lakshman was taken aback, especially when she called him dear. She added that the gold coins were cherished mementos of her deceased mother. Though confused, Lakshman noticed Aloys subtly wink at him, realizing she was putting on an act. Aloys continued her sentimental performance, saying her mother had toiled day and night to save this money, and now they had to part with it due to insufficient travel funds. The exchange owner, moved by her heartfelt words, asked if the coins were truly keepsakes. Aloys nodded, explaining they needed the money to travel deeper into the north, adding that her words weren't entirely untrue. The owner felt both guilty and touched. The owner agreed to exchange at the full rate of 20 copper coins per imperial gold coin. Aloys thanked him sincerely, saying she would use some of the money to buy a white daffodil and pray for her mother, because it was her mother's favorite flower. Deeply moved by Aloys's story, the owner mentioned his own deceased mother also loved white daffodils. Feeling a connection, he not only agreed to the higher exchange rate, but also, out of respect for the keepsakes, returned 2 gold coins. Outside the exchange, Lakshman asked in surprise how Aloys managed to get 200 copper coins with only 8 gold coins. Aloys explained that she put on the act because the owner's initial rate was clearly unfair, which she had sensed from Lakshman's hesitation during their conversation. Since Lakshman didn't haggle, she took matters into her own hands. She revealed that she had noticed a daffodil vase and a letter addressed to the owner's deceased mother in the shop, which gave her the idea to play the emotional card, guessing he still missed his mother. Her emotional performance was deliberate, aimed at swaying the owner. Lakshman, impressed, asked if she had come up with all that on the spot. Aloys simply smiled, saying she was merely following her mother's advice. Don't overthink, just do it. Aloys recalled her mother's teachings. Never trust a merchant who claims to be selling at a loss. True bargaining requires heart and wit. With the money exchanged, Aloys asked Lakshman where they should go next. He suggested buying some necessities first. He then took Aloys to buy new clothes, shoes, and a purse. Aloys hesitated, feeling like she was buying too much. But Lakshman reassured her, pointing out that she only had 1 dress and that the north was much colder than where she used to live. They had to buy some warm clothes. Touched by his thoughtfulness, Aloys felt a warmth in her heart. She admitted that if she had come alone, she wouldn't have been able to choose these things well. She thanked Lakshman. After buying a new dress, shoes, and a purse, Aloys was surprised to find everything packed into 2 large bags, feeling it was too much. But Lakshman insisted it was all deserved and offered to carry the bags for her. Aloys was surprised when he lifted the packages with ease. She realized then that although Lakshman looked like a skinny mercenary, he was actually very strong. The two walked through the market. Aloys was drawn to the various vegetable seedlings. She recalled secretly growing vegetables in the small kitchen garden back in the capital. But back then, the choices were limited, and without a stove or oven, cooking was inconvenient. The sight before her inspired her. She declared confidently that when they reached Lakshman's hometown, she would also cultivate her own vegetable garden. With a sense of freedom and determination, Aloys realized she was no longer bound or watched. She could finally live the life she chose in a safe and fertile village. Lakshman and Aloys walked towards his hometown. He pointed ahead, saying that Elden was just over that mountain. Aloys excitedly remarked that the name meant paradise in the ancient language, and eagerly asked him to tell her more about the town. Lakshman teased her for asking again. She explained her excitement about finally reaching the place she would live, even though she kept reminding herself it would only be for a year. Aloys couldn't help but envision her future life, choosing a clean house with a garden, cooking with fresh fruits and vegetables, dining and laughing with everyone at the village restaurant. Filled with freedom and hope, she walked with a light step, full of anticipation. But when they finally arrived in Elden, Elrose was stunned. The town before her was completely different from what she had imagined. Desolate and bleak, far from the paradise she had envisioned. Elrose's excitement vanished instantly, her spirits sinking as she looked at the barren land. Lakshman, however, commented that it was better than he expected. Elrose asked, bewildered, how could he think these ruins were good? Lakshman explained that he had feared there would be nothing left at all, as the area had been ravaged by war. Elrose realized then, with surprise, that Lakshman had known all along that the town was in ruins. He recalled having only spoken of happy childhood memories, never mentioning the true state of his hometown. Especially during his time living as Håkon, he now felt foolish for his past excitement. He had also drawn Elrose into his reminiscences. He worried that she had been full of hope for the future, and this dilapidated place could never fulfill her dreams. Seeing Elrose's disappointment, Lakshman offered to take her somewhere else if she wanted to leave, but Elrose apologized. She understood that it must be even more painful for Lakshman to see his home reduced to ruins. She knew she had no right to complain about her shattered expectations, for it was he who had lost everything. Lakshman smiled gently and told her it wasn't her fault. The Southerners had burned the town down. Though Elrose still worried, he reassured her and suggested they go to their new home, so she could rest properly. Lakshman thought to himself that he had once ignored the suffering of the North, and now, unexpectedly, someone was grieving for him. Lakshman led Elrose to their new home, assuring her that with a little repair, it could be restored to its former state. Suddenly, a red-haired man came out, surprised to see strangers, but recognized Lakshman. He almost called out Captain, but Lakshman punched him in the stomach, warning him in a low voice not to use that title again. The man's name was Kian, and he was puzzled by Elrose's presence, asking if she was someone important. Lakshman lied, saying she was the daughter of an acquaintance who had nowhere to go. Kian was skeptical, especially since Lakshman had never brought a girl home before, and she was an Imperial. But Lakshman brushed it off, firmly telling Kian to leave and warning him again not to call him Captain. He also revealed that Elrose would only be staying for a year, maybe even less. Kian left, still suspicious. Elrose asked if that was his friend. Lakshman nodded, introducing him as Kian, an old war comrade. Lakshman asked Elrose to let him go out for a while, worried that Kian might say something to the others. Elrose agreed. As soon as Lakshman left, Kian sarcastically yelled Captain after him, which alerted Lakshman's old subordinates, who rushed over upon hearing their leader had returned. Despite Lakshman's repeated request for them to call him just Lakshman and not to use titles or honorifics, Ramon, Darius, and Eden greeted him enthusiastically, joking as if nothing had changed. Someone asked who he had brought with him this time, and Lakshman said it was just a temporary guest. But Kian revealed it was a woman, and everyone was taken aback. Suddenly, there was a commotion and smoke rose. Everyone rushed out to see Elrose stumbling out of a burning house, looking panicked. Seeing the smoke, Lakshman immediately rushed towards the house. He burst through the door in a panic. Elrose, inside and unharmed, was startled by his sudden entrance. She was thinking about making the place habitable and was curiously looking for a water source. Just as she had hoped, she found a clean, moss-free well in the backyard, perfect for use. Her enthusiasm grew as she explored. She also discovered a pantry stocked with various ingredients, although of average quality. It was enough to ignite her passion for cooking, something she had longed to do since her time at the convent. Elrose energetically began cleaning the house and preparing to cook. Although the kitchen was heavily grimy and long neglected, she found genuine joy in restoring and using this old space. She didn't know that the smoke from her cooking would worry Lakshman and lead to an unexpected reunion at the door. While cooking, Elrose recalled the knowledge she had secretly learned in the convent kitchen, such as mixing equal parts vinegar and salt. Back then, she read to survive, never imagining these skills would become so vital. Now, she used this hidden knowledge to prepare eggs, meat stew, and various other dishes. As she cooked, she reflected on her journey, escaping the convent, marrying for inheritance, and then escaping again. For the first time, she felt truly free. Back in the present, Lakshman was surprised to find that in such a short time. Elrose had prepared a whole pot of stew. Ramon and Kian were equally shocked to find her cooking, and Aloys, with a shy smile, offered it to Lakshman and his friends first. Lakshman glanced back at his mercenaries, a silent warning in his eyes. Any mention of the word captain was forbidden. Soon everyone gathered, enjoying the meal and thanking her profusely. Aloys asked Lakshman if he liked it, and he was deeply touched. He told her he had never tasted stew like this before and asked if she had cooked often at the monastery. The others chimed in, praising the stew and claiming they could eat it forever. Seeing everyone's reaction, Aloys beamed. Kian teased Lakshman, saying that their stockpiled food was finally worth it, and Lakshman silently nodded in agreement. After tasting Aloys's delicious stew, Kian hesitantly asked if she would be willing to cook for them regularly during her stay. Lakshman immediately objected, reminding everyone that they ate too much and it would be too much for Aloys to handle. But to his surprise, Aloys eagerly insisted that she really wanted to cook for them. After the meal, the mercenaries were ecstatic, praising Aloys's cooking and thanking her enthusiastically. Some admitted that, being unable to cook, they had simply been roasting their ingredients. Half jokingly, half seriously, they declared that from now on, all the cooking was hers. Lakshman gave them a warning look. Later, as Lakshman helped with the dishes, Aloys noticed his quietness and wondered if he was upset that she had offered to cook. Lakshman denied being angry, somewhat flustered, but confessed to feeling guilty. He had promised to protect her, brought her to this chaotic town, and now she was cooking for everyone. He also recalled how the others had started requesting croissants and fruit tarts, which distressed him. Aloys laughed, teasing him about his exaggerated memory. Feeling ashamed, Lakshman dipped into a slight bow and sincerely apologized, reminding her that she was his guest and shouldn't feel burdened. Aloys opened up to Lakshman, saying she didn't want to live merely as a guest. Even if it was only for a year, she wanted to feel a sense of belonging. She recalled her lonely past, so isolated that she would talk to birds, fruits, and rabbits just to ease the solitude. Despite venturing to the village to interact with people, she always returned alone. This mealtime, however, was completely different. She cooked freely, shared laughter, listened to stories, and felt a genuine connection. She expressed her desire to continue cooking, but she couldn't eat it all herself, so she wanted to share it with everyone. Lakshman responded quietly. He said he would eat everything she made and wouldn't share it with anyone, leaving Aloys touched and a little shy. Lakshman explained that she didn't need his permission at all. As her guardian, he only wanted her to be comfortable and do what she enjoyed, but insisted that she should never let her efforts go unrewarded. Aloys cheerfully assured him that she knew how to value her own work. Lakshman, smiling, offered to wash the dishes and prepare the upstairs bed, silently expressing his support. Aloys happily went upstairs, promising to check the ingredients and make something delicious tomorrow. But as soon as she entered the pantry, she was horrified by what she saw. Everything was rotting, potatoes sprouting, insects crawling everywhere. Spoiled butter piled up on the shelves. She was shocked to discover that the situation here was worse than at the monastery. She felt disheartened. The mercenaries worked hard for their living, yet they wasted their money on inedible food. Anxious, she rushed downstairs and loudly questioned Lakshman about the state of the pantry. She told him most of the food was spoiled and unusable. Lakshman was surprised, explaining that Kian was in charge of contacting the food supplier and promised to talk to him the next day. For now, he gently gestured towards a bed with fresh linens, suggesting Aloys rest there for the night, then quietly left the room. As Lakshman prepared to leave, Aloys asked in surprise if he wasn't staying there tonight. Lakshman replied that there was only one bed, and he would sleep at Kian's. He handed her a special whistle, explaining that its sound could carry even beyond the mountains, instructing her to use it if she needed anything. Lakshman reassured her he'd be back in the morning and wished her good night. Aloys gratefully bid him farewell, carefully hanging the whistle around her neck, feeling it was safer that way. She reminded herself not to blow it unless absolutely necessary, as it could cause trouble. She began organizing her belongings, wondering if she should move to another house tomorrow. She decided to take a bath first. Opening the bathroom door, she was surprised to find hot water already prepared. She felt both grateful and a little guilty, realizing Lakshman had thoughtfully boiled water for her even after washing the dishes. His consideration touched her deeply. He had even chosen to sleep elsewhere so as not to make her uncomfortable, although she knew men and women shouldn't share a room. But she couldn't help but think that if it were Lakshman, Perhaps it would be all right. Smiling to herself, she prepared to enjoy her bath. Meanwhile, at Kian's house, Kian was annoyed to find Lakshman sleeping in his bed and demanded he give it back. Lakshman, lying comfortably, nonchalantly told him to sleep wherever he liked. Kian grumbled, asking Lakshman why he had come to a house with only one bed in the first place. The next morning, Aloys woke up, feeling the northern chill, and began to examine the map. She wondered if the nearest bank branch was in ruin and recalled that 20,000 gold coins remained of the 100,000 her mother had left her. She remembered hearing that the bank employed many mercenaries for protection, and that the border Swan had crossed was magically sealed, indicating the war was still ongoing. She still hoped to withdraw the money in a year. Aloys felt that 20,000 gold coins would be enough for her to live comfortably for 10 years. Once withdrawn, she intended to reward Lakshman handsomely. After all, he had saved her life, and she didn't want to be stingy. With that in mind, she got dressed for breakfast. After changing, she searched the room for a mirror. She was surprised to find there wasn't one anywhere. While rummaging through the drawers, Aloys found a sketch of a woman and initially thought it might be Lakshman's girlfriend. She was a little surprised, as he had never mentioned being in a relationship, but then she thought it might just be a betrothal and had nothing to do with her. However, noticing a mole on the woman's face, she began to doubt it was Lakshman's at all. Just then, Lakshman entered, asking if she was awake. Startled, Aloys quickly replied and thanked him. Lakshman complimented her clothes, saying they suited her. Aloys explained that while it looked like a dress, it actually had trousers sewn inside, and that northern clothes were comfortable and had large pockets. Then, she handed him the sketch she had found, apologizing for looking at it without permission and complimenting the well-drawn expression. Lakshman clarified that the person in the drawing wasn't him, which surprised Aloys even more. She felt an inexplicable sense of relief, then puzzled by her own reaction. Lakshman told Aloys that the drawing was of his father, and the woman beside him was his mother. He explained that although his father had burned all the portraits of his mother, he couldn't bring himself to destroy this one. Lakshman thanked Aloys for finding it, saying that if it weren't for her, it might have remained forgotten in the drawer. Aloys modestly said she had just stumbled upon it, though inwardly admitting she had initially mistaken the woman for Lakshman's girlfriend. Lakshman blushed, realizing he had inadvertently revealed something so personal to her. Aloys asked about his parents, and Lakshman said they were both deceased. Aloys apologized for her question, but he reassured her it was fine. To lighten the mood, he suggested they eat and then look for a house. Aloys suggested a simple vegetable soup for breakfast, and Lakshman readily agreed, offering to fetch the water. After breakfast, Lakshman suggested they choose one of the empty houses to live in and move out if the owner returned. Aloys worried about whether it was appropriate not to pay, but Lakshman reassured her it was the owner's responsibility. Aloys recalled living in a dilapidated house and transforming it into a comfortable home through cleaning and organizing. Although she liked Lakshman's house, she decided not to be greedy. As they went to look for a house, Aloys said she wanted a large kitchen with an oven, a well in the backyard, and preferably close to Lakshman's house. Lakshman thought of his friend Sean's house, saying it would be easier to communicate with the owner. However, when they returned, they found someone had already entered the house. Lakshman was surprised to see Kian. Kian casually explained that he had nothing to do and was just repairing the house. Lakshman was surprised Kian would help Sean fix his house, as they weren't close. Kian nonchalantly said it didn't matter how close they were. He was just bored, so he came to help with the repairs. He even offered to show Lakshman and Aloys around, thinking the house might be suitable for them. As they walked inside, Lakshman recalled Sean's quiet and organized nature, which explained why the house was always clean. Aloys, pleased to see the kitchen had an oven, seemed satisfied, although she secretly compared it to Lakshman's slightly larger kitchen, wondering if it would be all right for her to live here alone. As they walked towards the bedroom, Lakshman was surprised to find a large hole in the wall. Kian explained that he was in the process of patching it, but admitted the house was badly damaged and uninhabitable. He looked to Aloys for agreement, and she hesitantly concurred. Lakshman silently suspected the damage was recent, wondering what Kian was really up to. Lakshman suggested they check the neighboring houses and decided to move on. Meanwhile, Kian smiled to himself, pleased with the situation. He saw this as a perfect opportunity to bring Lakshman and Aloys closer. A brief flashback showed Kian on the battlefield, asking Lakshman if he had anyone he liked. In the memory, Kian warned Lakshman that if he continued like this, he would end up alone. Lakshman, visibly tired, replied that he didn't need a partner. He was too weary and had given up on the idea. At the time, Kian had felt sorry for him. But now, watching Lakshman and Aloys together, the atmosphere light and pleasant, Kian felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps, he thought, things might finally be looking up for Lakshman. Even if it didn't happen naturally, he was determined to make it happen. They inspected several houses. Lakshman and Aloys found them all abandoned and dilapidated, unfit for living. Aloys was disheartened to see the extent of the war's devastation, seeing the state of the village. Lakshman angrily suspected that Kian and the others hadn't done anything to restore it. Seeing this, Kian slyly suggested that Aloys continue staying at Lakshman's house. Lakshman immediately saw through Kian's scheme, aware of his attempts to push them together. He glared at him silently, annoyed. Lakshman briefly entertained the idea of presenting Kian with a marriage certificate, declaring he and Aloys were legally married, just to stop his meddling, but quickly dismissed it as it would only make things more awkward for Aloys. He sighed inwardly, reminding himself that she would be leaving in a year anyway. Just then, Aloys spotted a patch of basil and cried out in excitement. Lakshman explained, surprised, that it was his friend Anand's old farm, now overgrown. Anand had grown grains and experimented with various special herbs. Some plants, like the basil, were evidently still thriving. Aloys, delighted, spotted more herbs nearby and pointed to a building in the distance. Lakshman told her it was probably a storage shed, which might still contain old farming tools. At that moment, the other mercenaries ran over, calling out to Kian, Lakshman, and Aloys. They greeted Aloys enthusiastically, eager to know what was for lunch and hoping for a hearty meat dish. Aloys announced she was making pesto pasta, explaining it was a sauce made with basil, garlic, pine nuts, olive oil, and cheese, and that she had found plenty of pasta in the pantry. The mercenaries' faces fell, clearly disappointed. Aloys, a little nervous, asked what was wrong. Lakshman explained that leafy herbs like basil wouldn't provide them with enough energy. Aloys quickly understood their concern and reassured them, saying she would also roast meat and potatoes to make the meal more substantial. The mention of meat and potatoes brought expressions of delight to their faces. They asked, surprised, if she was really going to make that much food. Lakshman, exasperated by their reaction, lightly smacked his forehead, scolding them to just eat whatever was made. Raman fumed, making Aloys worried. Aloys quickly stepped between Lakshman and Raman, pleading with Raman not to hurt Lakshman. Tearfully, she called Lakshman a frail man and asked them to be lenient with him. The mercenaries were shocked, well aware of Lakshman's strength and prowess in battle. Confused, they played along. Aloys quickly changed the subject, asking for help picking basil leaves. She patiently explained that the basil plant would die if all the leaves were picked at once, so they should only pick the large leaves, allowing the smaller ones to continue growing. The group listened attentively, gradually understanding the method. As they worked, they wondered amongst themselves what had happened to Lakshman. Aloys began assigning tasks, instructing Aiden, Raman, and Darius to fill a bag with basil leaves, while Kian and Kugan were to follow her. Lakshman approached, asking what other ingredients needed preparing. Aloys replied that potatoes and onions needed chopping and the pasta needed boiling. Lakshman suggested they could help with some of the simpler tasks, and the others eagerly volunteered. Kian and Darius confidently offered their assistance. Aloys, smiling, assigned the potato chopping task to Kian and the onion chopping to Kugan. Kugan, knife in hand, excitedly started chopping the onions, but then made a suggestion asking if everything had to be made from scratch. He mentioned that merchants sold ready-made ingredients and offered to order some if Aloys was willing, as they hadn't tried using these pre-made ingredients before, mainly due to lack of experience. Aloys explained that using fresh basil wasn't just about better flavor, it was also more economical, especially when they needed to save money. She emphasized that if something could be grown, it should be. When Kian asked who would be responsible for this, Aloys excitedly volunteered, mentioning she used to have her own small garden. She then asked Lakshman if she could borrow a plot of land to cultivate, which he agreed to since the owner, Anand, hadn't returned yet. Turning to Kian, Aloys confirmed he was in charge of purchasing supplies and requested to see the shopping list so she could add or remove items. She also wanted to check the prices of everything. Kian admitted he didn't remember the prices, but then recalled he had receipts. Hearing this, Aloys happily agreed, and Kian immediately ran to fetch them. Practical and with a touch of a motherly business sense, Aloys suggested to Lakshman that if they had surplus produce, they could consider selling it to merchants. Lakshman agreed, saying it might be a good way to earn some money, and promised to ask Kian if it was feasible. Just then, Kian hurried back with a few sheets of paper, triumphantly announcing he'd found the receipts. Aloys, surprised by his quick return, politely took them. Kian, clearly proud, mentioned how meticulously he had kept them. However, as Aloys began to examine the documents, her initially pleasant expression quickly faded. She trembled with shock, finding the receipts a chaotic mess, lacking crucial information like item names, prices, or quantities. From vegetables and dairy to herbs and spices, everything was vaguely lumped together into a total of 20 imperial gold coins. Confused and frustrated, Aloys wondered inwardly how such disorganized records could be accepted. Kian, still holding the receipts, explained to Aloys that he had gone to great lengths to obtain them, as the merchant hadn't wanted to provide them at all. Aloys, upon seeing the outrageous total on the receipt, was visibly angered. She pointed out that prices in the north might be higher, but this was far beyond reasonable. 3 gold coins would have been enough to buy everything, and the additional 5 gold coins for delivery was absurd. Kian defended the merchant, saying the high delivery fee was due to the merchant having to take a detour around the mountains to reach them. Aloys, still skeptical, asked if freight wagons were truly that expensive locally. Lakshman replied that they weren't. In fact, every village had one because of the distances between them. Aloys then asked Lakshman if they had a wagon themselves. He replied that they did have one, but someone had taken it when they ran away and it hadn't been found. Shocked, Aloys asked how much a wagon cost, and Lakshman told her small ones were 50 cues in gold coins, and larger ones could exceed 100. Aloys gasped in surprise. Still fuming, Aloys inwardly grumbled about the merchant's exorbitant delivery fee, realizing they were being taken advantage of. She turned to Kian and asked when the merchant would come. Kane happily agreed, admitting he'd always just bought whatever the merchant recommended without much thought, which is why he had so many leftovers he didn't know what to do with. Elias finally understood, also learning that the group added 5 gold coins to the money pouch each week, and currently about 40% of the coins remained. Ella was surprised, saying that 1 gold coin was actually more than enough. Kane explained that using 5 gold coins hadn't been a problem, but reassured Ella that she wouldn't have to contribute. Ella wondered why. Kane explained that they had all discussed it and agreed that Ella cooking every day was quite a lot of work. Ella acknowledged his point, recalling Kane's suggestion that instead of sharing the grocery cost, they should pay Ella 10 gold coins a week as compensation for cooking. Ella was astonished and quickly refused, saying she offered to cook because she enjoyed it. However, Lakesham insisted that since everyone had asked for her help, she should be compensated. He understood that she liked cooking, but reminded her that everyone has times when they don't feel like doing something, even things they enjoy. Ella pondered Lakesham's precise sense of fairness, realizing he was speaking from his experience as a mercenary. Lakesham added that if Ella didn't accept payment, she might one day come to resent something she once loved. None of them wanted that to happen, and the others nodded in agreement as Ella continued to look shocked. Lakesham told Ella that she could take weekends off, or if she was sick, she just needed to let them know in advance that she couldn't cook. Ella felt that these conditions were too generous, but Lakesham smiled and pointed to the list of recipes they had compiled, saying they were all looking forward to her cooking. Ken also expressed how happy everyone was to be able to eat her food. Aloys, aware of the responsibilities she'd taken on, agreed to continue and prepare lunch. She delegated tasks, instructing Kian and Coogan to wash and boil the potatoes. She asked Lakshman to help squeeze the water out of the cooked basil leaves. Lakshman agreed without hesitation. Aloys noticed that Lakshman's name wasn't on the list for cooking compensation. Feeling a pang of guilt, she offered to make something special for him as well. Lakshman reassured her, saying he didn't want her to feel pressured and prefer to stay out of it. He told her not to worry about him, saying he was content with the current arrangement. However, Aloys still felt conflicted, wanting to do something for him. As everyone continued preparing lunch, Aloys took charge, directing everyone's efforts. She asked Lakshman to help crank the handle, turning the blade that mixed the basil leaves, pine nuts, garlic, and olive oil. Lakshman assisted her, but as he worked, he felt that these tasks were too strenuous for Aloys. He thought it would be easier to buy these ingredients in a larger village, saving all this trouble. Aloys proudly presented her finished pesto, urging Lakshman to try it. He took a taste, his face immediately lighting up with surprise, praising its deliciousness. Aloys was taken aback by his reaction. Lakshman compared it to the pesto from restaurants, pointing out that the store-bought kind tasted bitter and lacked aroma. He said it must have been sitting around for too long, and Aloys agreed, explaining that pesto loses its flavor over time. She laughed, playfully snatching the pesto back from him, expressing her happiness that he liked it, and promising to make it even better next time. Lakshman was surprised to hear it could get any better. Aloys had prepared a delicious feast, the kitchen filled with enticing aromas. It made everyone feel as if they were dining in a fine restaurant in the capital. With a warm smile and her hair braided, she reminded everyone to wash their hands before eating. After the meal, everyone's plates were clean, and they praised her cooking with satisfied smiles and words of gratitude. Lakshman called out for everyone to wash the dishes, thoughtfully pouring Aloys a cup of tea and urging her to rest. As Aloys sat down, the others began cleaning, not only washing dishes, but also tidying the entire kitchen. They discovered a pile of ash under the old oven, and the vent near the counter needed maintenance. Everyone worked together, caring for their shared home. When Aloys offered to help them clean the house instead of looking for a new place to live, everyone responded enthusiastically, taking on different tasks. Someone offered to repair the oven, another took charge of cleaning the chimney, and others went to fix the roof and tend the garden. Kian, watching everyone's energy, marveled at the change. Not long ago, they were weak and silent, barely surviving on boiled potatoes. Since Aloys and Lakshman arrived, everyone's spirits had been revived, and her delicious meals had filled the house with warmth and life again. Kian, grateful and moved, jokingly proposed to Aloys, thanking her for everything. Lakshman frowned, displeased with Kian's casual tone. He understood that for someone like Aloys, who grew up in the Empire, marriage was no trifling matter. Aloys jokingly replied that if Kian could harvest the rest of the basil, she might consider it, making everyone laugh. Thinking about marriage, Lakshman began to wonder if he had misunderstood its significance. He recalled his offhand comment about Northerners not caring about formalities, worried that it had made Aloys think Northerners were casual about marriage. Aloys, noticing his unusual demeanor, asked him what was wrong. But before he could answer, Kian teased him about harvesting the basil. Lakshman, slightly annoyed, retorted by telling Kian to fetch some wooden planks from his house. Aloys, curious, asked what the planks were for. Lakshman explained that he wanted to make a footstool for her, having noticed that the kitchen counter was too high and inconvenient for her while cooking. Aloys felt conflicted, but said she didn't need it, as she would be leaving soon anyway. She inwardly chided herself for spending time cleaning instead of looking for a new home, and now she was unsure of her place among them. Aloys awkwardly mentioned the house she had her eye on. Lakshman gently advised her not to rush into a decision. He suggested she could stay at his place a while longer, just as he nervously tried to suggest they could continue living together. Kian returned with the wooden planks, interrupting the moment. Both Aloys and Lakshman, interrupted, worked silently side by side, a slight awkwardness lingering in the air. Lakshman misheard Aloys, thinking she was injured, but Aloys explained she was just asking Kian where he lived. Lakshman, surprised, asked her why. She simply explained that if anything happened, she wanted to know where to find him, a silent expression of her concern despite the lingering awkwardness between them. Lakshman felt both relieved and pleased when Alice said she wanted to know where everyone lived so she could bring them food, especially since it meant she wanted to see him too. He smiled, realizing she was more interested in visiting him. Later, after finishing the footstool he made for her, Lakshman asked if she liked it. Aloys, touched, said it was perfect, though she reminded herself not to get her hopes up about staying. As Lakshman prepared to leave, he reminded her to lock her door. He also asked about the safety whistle he'd given her, and Aloys showed him it was hanging on her necklace. They said a quiet goodbye, each carrying the other's concern, agreeing to see each other again tomorrow after everyone else had left. Alone in her house, Alice began to feel uneasy in the quiet. She admitted to being a little scared on her own, whispering that she wished Lakshman were still there with her. The next morning, a slime merchant entered the village, confidently thinking of another easy profit. He went straight to Lakshman's residence, greeting Kian, but noticed new faces, especially Aloys. When he asked for payment up front, Kian told him that Aloys was now in charge of orders and payments. The merchant appeared surprised and displeased, doubting such a young lady could judge the quality of goods. But Aloys calmly walked over to his cart and inspected the goods. She became suspicious, her intuition telling her, "These are yours. I knew it all along," implying a problem with the merchant's goods. Aloys confidently grabbed a sack of potatoes and threw it on the ground. The merchant reacted with shock, scrambling to pick up the scattered potatoes, yelling angrily at her. But Aloys remained calm and firm, declaring they wouldn't buy the potatoes because they were worthless. The merchant demanded she explain why. Aloys pointed out the obvious problems. Many potatoes were rotten and sprouting. She explained that such low-quality produce shouldn't be sold, as it could make people sick. And because of the mold, the potatoes weren't even good for planting. The merchant became anxious and shocked, realizing Aloys could easily identify inferior products. He internally justified his past actions, thinking anyone would take advantage of customers who didn't inspect goods or question prices. He regretted his presumption, masking his embarrassment with an awkward laugh. He pretended it was a mistake, offering the bad potatoes for free, but Aloys refused, insisting he take them back as they would only be wasted. Then she pulled out previous transaction receipts, pointing out numerous discrepancies. The merchant started sweating, caught off guard when she mentioned the supposed saffron purchase, stammering and unable to speak clearly. Aloys held up a bag she'd taken from the merchant's storage, asking if the saffron inside was real. The merchant, caught completely off guard, let out a yelp. As Aloys examined the saffron, her mind flashed back to her childhood. She recalled her mother teaching her how to distinguish real saffron from fake. Her mother said that real saffron turns a beautiful golden yellow in water, while fake saffron turns a deep red due to dyes. Merchants often mix dyed, fake saffron with real saffron to deceive customers. Back in the present, Aloys carefully inspected the saffron, finding it to be fake. She noted the threads lacked the distinct aroma of real saffron, confirming the merchant had been selling counterfeit goods. Aloys turned to Kian, sternly asking why he would buy saffron. Kian, taken aback, explained that everyone was exhausted after the war, and he'd heard saffron tea could soothe bad memories and improve sleep. He admitted he bought it for those reasons, only to discover it was fake. Aloys reassured him it wasn't his fault, and they should blame the merchant who sold the fake goods. Back in the present, Aloys confronted the merchant, stating the entire bottle of saffron was fake. The merchant, visibly nervous, denied the accusations, insisting he'd been doing business locally for decades and had never sold fake saffron. He was shocked by Aloys' accusations. Aloys angrily told the merchant the saffron was fake, and as a merchant, he should be able to tell the difference. She criticized him for selling fake goods, questioning his conscience. The merchant, clearly enraged, decided he couldn't tolerate the insults any longer, thinking he had to leave. He indignantly offered to take the bottle back. Complaining about the difficulty of procuring the saffron and demanding a refund, the merchant ultimately declared he wouldn't deliver to them again. He left angrily, hurrying away as he realized the situation was deteriorating. The merchant quickly tried to flee in his cart. Still furious, Aloys shouted after him, insisting their conversation wasn't over. Lakshman and Kian exchanged a knowing look and a smile, both feeling that today was the perfect day for a special task. They immediately gave chase, determined to catch the merchant. Aloys ordered them to pursue him, and shortly after, Lakshman and Kian successfully apprehended the merchant and tied him up. Even more enraged, Aloys turned to the merchant and declared she wouldn't tolerate his actions. She demanded to know who was in charge of the region, intending to report the merchant to the authorities. Terrified and realizing the severity of the consequences, the merchant begged Aloys not to report him, explaining that the territory belonged to Lord Haken, and he didn't want to anger him. Unwavering, Aloys handed him a letter to sign, demanding he take responsibility. Crying and trembling, the merchant wrote a confession admitting the faulty goods and promising to provide Aloys with quality products every week for the next year. Coldly, Aloys stated that this was the consequence of his deception. Kian, impressed with Aloys' handling of the situation, complimented her, but then his stomach rumbled, and he asked Aloys what was for lunch. Aloys noted that they had been busy all morning. She decided on a tomato salad with the basil they picked yesterday and steak with mushroom sauce. She promised a delicious meal after their hard work. Lakshman then asked Aloys why she had chosen her new residence. He mentioned a hole in the bedroom wall. Unconcerned, Aloys explained that she would use a room without a hole, mentioning a small bedroom she found in the study that was perfect for her height. Lakshman, slightly nervous, hesitated before suggesting she stay at his place, offering to sleep in the living room. But Aloys insisted on moving her things today. Lakshman agreed, and Kian, though slightly hesitant about the decision, was also present. Lakshman reassured him that they could greet the people at the farm after they finished moving. He mentioned they only had a few chickens and sheep at the moment, but they wouldn't have to worry about eggs and milk in the future. Aloys was delighted at the prospect of buying dairy nearby, thinking it was wonderful. Kian watched them impatiently, thinking to himself that he had given up on understanding their relationship. Lakshman then told Aloys that he and Kian would fetch the rest of her belongings, suggesting she take a look around. Aloys thanked him gratefully, planning to visit Annan's farm. She hoped to find some herbs they didn't have. As Aloys pushed open the gate and walked in, something darted past her, startling her. She panicked momentarily, but quickly realized that since it ran away from her, it probably wasn't dangerous. Afterwards, Aloys happily picked flowers, but gradually felt a sense of unease. She noticed something staring at her and became tense. She reminded herself that Lakshman had said the animals here weren't dangerous, but she still felt like someone was watching her. Feeling threatened, Aloys quickly grabbed a stone for self-defense. Gripping the stone tightly, the atmosphere grew tense, and she called out, demanding to know who was there. A woman, startled by her actions, frantically pleaded with Aloys not to throw the stone. Aloys, still wary, asked who she was. The woman introduced herself as Lisa, explaining that she lived on a farm at the other end of the village. She then confirmed that Aloys was the person she was looking for. Aloys, surprised that Lisa recognized her, learned that Lisa knew her because Kian had visited their farm that morning. Kian had asked Lisa to say hello to Aloys if she saw her. So Lisa had followed Aloys, hoping to find her. Understanding the situation, Aloys admitted that she had been startled by the feeling of being followed. She then asked Lisa if she could help with anything, wondering why she had come all the way from the other side of the village. Lisa, clearly annoyed, explained that she was looking for Kian. Kian had visited her farm that morning and asked her for some eggs, which she had agreed to give him. But after he left, she discovered the chicken coop door was open and she had lost 3 chickens. Angry, she demanded to know what Kian planned to do about it. She urged Aloys to come with her. Aloys, looking at the wooden gate with some concern, hesitated, wanting to calm Lisa down, but Lisa was too angry. She rushed up to Kian and started hitting him, venting her fury. Kian yelled in pain, protesting that it wasn't his fault, insisting he remembered closing the coop door. However, Lisa didn't believe him and continued slapping Kian, insisting that he was the only one who had been in the chicken coop that morning. Lakshman, witnessing the scene, asked Kian exasperatedly how he could have forgotten to close the door. Kian stubbornly insisted that he hadn't left the coop open. He finally apologized and offered to compensate for the lost chickens. However, Lisa made it clear that money wasn't the issue. She wanted him to go to the Deva livestock market and buy her 6 new hens, and healthy ones at that. Kian questioned why she needed 6 when she had only lost 3, earning himself another slap from Lisa, who then demanded he buy 2 wolfhounds as well. She specifically emphasized that they should be puppies. Kian was furious, accusing her of taking advantage of the situation, but Lisa didn't care. Lakshman suggested that Kian should just handle the matter himself. Aloys asked with interest if wolfhounds really existed. Lakshman explained that they were a rare breed from the northern farms, a cross between dogs and gray wolves. While difficult to tame, once their loyalty was earned, it lasted a lifetime. Aloys considered getting one herself, thinking it would be comforting to have one at night. But Lisa advised against it, saying that wolfhounds were difficult to train unless raised from pups. She shared her own experience, saying most people struggled to tame them and often lost them in the end. Aloys said she understood. As Lisa left, waving goodbye, Lakshman asked Aloys if she liked dogs. She replied that she loved all animals, but lacked the experience and confidence to keep any. She added that if she ever tried, she'd start with something easy to care for. Changing the subject, she asked Lakshman if he was busy today. She mentioned wanting to visit Anand's warehouse, and Lakshman agreed. Aloys slung her backpack over her shoulder, saying she needed to drop it off in her room and would be back shortly. As she approached her house, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. She wondered, with a touch of worry, if she had forgotten to close it. A little uneasy, she slowly entered the house, trying to be as quiet as possible. She remembered Lakshman reminding her to always close the door and mentally chided herself for being careless. She decided not to dwell on it, intending to grab her backpack and leave quickly. Later, as Lakshman began showing her around Anand's warehouse, Aloys exclaimed excitedly upon seeing rosemary, saying it was perfect for removing the fishy smell from meat, especially freshwater fish. She remembered Darius promising to catch some for her. Lakshman then removed a door from its hinges. Aloys asked, surprised, if that was really all right. Lakshman reassured her that Anand would fix it when he returned and invited her inside. Aloys followed, impressed by Lakshman's strength. Aloys stepped into the warehouse, marveling that it resembled a greenhouse more than a storage space. She quickly noticed some packaged items and curiously inspected them. Seeing labels for rosemary, fennel, anise, parsley, capers, and nasturtiums, she realized they were all herbs. She was even more surprised to discover that they were actually seeds, so many varieties all together. Lakshman added that there were also tubers. Aloys curiously inquired about Anand's occupation. Lakshman thought for a moment, then said Anand was an eccentric man who preferred the garden to the indoors, often creating strange and unusual things. Aloys asked for an example, and Lakshman recounted a peculiar incident. Once, a plant had grown tomatoes on its stem and potatoes on its roots. Aloys was astonished, wondering if that was even possible or if it was just for show. Lakshman explained that Anand had mentioned grafting, but the end result wasn't ideal. The harvest tasted bad and had to be discarded. Aloys felt a pang of regret at that. However, Lakshman said not all of Anand's experiments were failures. He had once cultivated a wheat variety resistant to storms and locusts, which saved his farm during a disaster. Because of these achievements, there were rumors in the village that Anand had learned magic from a mage. Aloys declared admiringly that Anand was a true innovator of seeds. Lakshman was startled by her enthusiasm, silently marveling at the transformation of Anand's image. He remembered, hearing that seed improvement required significant resources and manpower, and even in the north, progress was limited, yet here was someone conducting all sorts of experiments alone in a remote northern village. Lakshman interrupted his thoughts and asked Aloys if she needed anything. She happily replied that she was just about to buy some farming tools, and here they were. She selected a sickle and a hoe, deciding to take both. If they weren't sharp enough, she would ask Kian to sharpen them. As for the seeds and tubers, she suddenly remembered something. In a brief flashback, Aloys remembered seeing some tubers at the market. When a merchant said they were spoiled and couldn't be sold, she asked if she could take them. The merchant agreed, and Aloys thought that if she cut off the moldy parts and planted the rest, she might eventually have a harvest. Later, she excitedly tended her small plot, watching her tomatoes thrive and feeling hopeful. She prayed the tubers would do the same. But despite her efforts and optimism, they never sprouted. This left her silently disappointed. Aloys stared in dismay at her failed garden, realizing something had gone terribly wrong. Through her studies, she learned that even seed from healthy plants lose their viability over time, especially after 2 or 3 years. They often become moldy and rot even more severely. Moldy tubers could even ruin an entire garden. Despite all her reading and hard work, she ultimately had to abandon the original plot and start over. This time, however, her eyes gleamed with new determination. Aloys silently vowed to plant Annon's precious seeds before they spoiled, determined not to let his efforts go to waste. As she hoisted the heavy sacks onto her shoulders began to ache and her body swayed, but she gritted her teeth and refused to stop. Lakshman, worried, urged her to put the sacks down. She insisted she could manage and said she wanted to repay Annan when he returned. Lakshman gently took the sacks from her back and asked why she was pushing herself so hard. Aloys froze, hesitated for a moment, and then softly replied that she wasn't doing this just out of interest, but because she wanted to take care of the village. Lakshman asked, somewhat puzzled, what she meant. She explained that on her way here, she had seen several villages, and it was easy to tell which ones were abandoned. Lakshman curiously asked how she could tell. Aloys told him that no matter how dilapidated the houses were, or whether there were any shops, as long as there were still people in the village, there was always one thing in common. The gardens were well maintained. Aloys paused, then continued, saying that she could have easily taken it easy this year. But since she was living here now, she wanted to do her part to improve the place. As long as Elden Village kept its gardens, perhaps passing travelers would realize that there were still people here, and perhaps she wouldn't have to leave either. She added a little sheepishly that if Lakshman didn't like it, she would try to be more discreet. But Lakshman laughed and said she couldn't possibly not do these things. He smiled gently and told her that being discreet probably wouldn't work either, because he would always be watching her. Aloys froze, surprised by this sudden tenderness. Late at night, the mercenaries gathered at Lakshman's house, curious about why Aloys had invited them. They guessed it must have something to do with food, especially when she mentioned having a lot of produce, and a tempting aroma filled the air. Everyone rushed into the house excitedly. Aloys insisted they wash their hands before she served them a southern snack. Fried corn kernels sautéed in butter and salt. Although Lakshman preferred corn porridge, he still trusted Aloys' cooking. When the soft and fragrant corn entered their mouths, everyone was captivated by the delicious savory flavor. Kian was especially impressed, asking for more even after the pot was almost empty. Aloys promised to make it even better next time, leaving everyone anticipating it. While Aloys was cooking, Lakshman walked in and curiously asked what she was making. With a playful smile, she teased him, saying that mixing delicious things with delicious things would definitely make it even more delicious. Lakshman eagerly offered to help and began stirring the mixture. Following her instructions, he ensured the caramel evenly coated the corn. The sweet fragrance filled the room, and as he stirred, he said the waiting was agonizing. Aloys laughed and said it was almost ready, then offered him a taste, unsure if her first attempt would be successful. She shyly fed him with her hand, and both of them blushed. Lakshman stammered that it was delicious, clearly flustered, while Aloys panicked inwardly, realizing she had just touched his lips. Kian's stomach suddenly growled, asking if the food was ready, startling both Aloys and Lakshman. Aloys quickly said it was ready and that she would bring it out right away. Everyone quickly gathered to taste the freshly made popcorn, praising the sweet and savory blend. Afterward, Aloys happily announced that all the old corn had been used up. Lakshman was surprised to learn that the snack was made from leftover corn. Aloys explained that although the corn wasn't spoiled, it wasn't suitable for other dishes. Then she took out a document, which was her one-year plan and goals for rebuilding Elden Village. Someone pointed out that this meant welcoming outsiders into the community. Aloys confirmed this, explaining that it was the very reason she had called the meeting. Lakshman stated that what Elden Village truly needed now wasn't land or money, but people. Waiting for the original inhabitants to return wasn't realistic, yet Darius voiced his opposition to this. He firmly opposed bringing in outsiders. While Aloys understood the concerns of a small village community, she clarified that she wasn't suggesting they accept just anyone. Darius, still unwilling to support the idea, abruptly left the meeting. Kian commented that it was rare for Darius to speak so much at once. When asked, Lakshman confirmed his support for Aloys' plan. He encouraged the others to agree as well. Kian admitted to feeling some unease about strangers, but if they let fear hold them back, they would never experience the joy of such delicious food again. Aloys was relieved and surprised by the support, having expected everyone to oppose her idea. As the meeting concluded, she asked Kian to tell Darius that if he didn't come for lunch tomorrow, she would personally bring it to him. Lakshman suggested she go home, but Aloys insisted on sweeping the floor first and told him to wash the pots. That way they could finish tidying up quickly. As they cleaned together, Lakshman contemplated asking her to stay the night and offering her the sofa. But before he could speak, Aloys thanked him and prepared to leave with the leftover food. Slightly flustered, Lakshman offered to walk her home. At her door, she sweetly thanked him and said goodnight. Lakshman stood there quietly, a faint smile on his face. Late that night, Aloys, candle in hand, entered her room and started upstairs, thinking about getting ready for bed. Suddenly, she heard a strange noise, startling her. She nervously hesitated, wondering if she should call for Lakshman, knowing he would come immediately, but worried it might be something trivial, like a mouse. She mustered her courage, carefully entering the room and asking if anyone was there, only to find it empty. She then realized it was just a fallen lid, feeling both relieved and a little embarrassed. She recalled her time at the monastery, fearlessly traversing the dark forest, and wondered if she had become afraid of the dark since leaving. Later, Aloys hesitantly picked up a pen and paper, softly promising to repay Sean for everything he had used when he returned. She began making plans, writing down the date, April 15th, organizing her thoughts. She counted the people currently in the village, herself and Lakshman, 5 mercenaries, Lisa's family of 6, and a few returned villagers. But she realized that most people seemed eager to leave. A memory flashed in her mind. A woman named Mary greeted Lakshman warmly. Seeing Aloys, Mary curiously asked who she was, and Lakshman introduced Aloys as a friend's daughter. Mary welcomed her warmly, and Aloys responded politely. Lakshman asked Mary if she planned to stay, and Mary said she had intended to, but circumstances had changed. A lifelong merchant, she explained that with no one farming and no buyers, she was considering moving to a nearby larger city. She also mentioned her children's education as a factor in her decision. Lakshman was visibly saddened by the news. Aloys, observing their conversation, recalled a time when even Lakshman had seemed disheartened. She resolved to work harder and prevent more people from leaving the village. The next morning, everyone was working diligently in the fields. Aloys cheerfully called everyone over for a snack, distributing the potato pies she had just made, lifting everyone's spirits. The fields were almost completely plowed. Kian mentioned that Kogan had done most of the work, likely motivated by the cookies Aloys had made the previous day. Aloys was tuchet, and planned to make a delicious lunch for everyone. However, she was a little worried because Darius hadn't shown up. Lakshman, noticing her mood, gently asked her what was wrong. When she voiced her concern, Kian jokingly offered to eat Darius's portion, earning him a light tap from Lakshman. Just then, Lisa came running, breathless and panicked, asking for help finding her missing rooster. The rooster that usually protected the hens. Kian teasingly, and with mock disapproval, asked Lisa if she had forgotten to close the coop. Lisa insisted she hadn't, stating the latch was clearly locked. She said the real problem was that the thief hadn't left any footprints. After everyone carefully examined the coop and found nothing, she formally requested their help in retrieving her rooster. When Lakshman inquired about a reward, Lisa promised free eggs from her farm for a month. Aloys excitedly announced there would be a special bonus as well. Whoever fulfills Lisa's request will enjoy a different delicious egg dish made by her every day for the entire month. These are 30 of the Empire's most delicious egg dishes, full of delicious motivation. Everyone cheered excitedly, eager to participate in the search after lunch. During lunch, everyone ate heartily, joking and arguing about who would win the egg prize. Lucian calmly announced that he would go directly to the farm to investigate after lunch, while the others continued to eat and merrily argue about the eggs. Aloys wondered who stole the rooster. Someone who could open and close the latch without leaving footprints. Lakshman said seriously, perhaps it's a monster, one of those strange creatures driven by the half-breeds from beyond the northern mountains, used for transport or attack. Aloys asked in shock, how could such a creature appear here? The half-breeds have already retreated beyond the northern mountains. Lucian explained that although most of the half-breeds took back the monsters they could control, some might have escaped during the war. and stayed here. Aloys listened calmly, showing unexpected interest in the monsters, which surprised Lakshman. Just then, Kian excitedly volunteered to catch the monster. Before he left, Aloys handed him a basket and asked him to take it to Darius later. As Aloys prepared to leave, Lakshman offered to walk her home. She was a little puzzled, thinking they were going to lease his farm. But Lakshman said it might be too dangerous there because of the monster and insisted on taking her home. Aloys was a little disappointed and protested that she also wanted to go and see. Aloys put on an innocent, teary-eyed expression and told Lakshman that she would be safe with him. Lakshman blushed, but still refused. He said he had enough trouble protecting himself and couldn't take her. Aloys pouted and turned to leave. Later, as they walked to her house together, Aloys told him, "If you encounter any danger, run away immediately, understand?" Sean agreed, thinking to himself that it might not be a bad thing that she saw him as just a mercenary in name. He told her to rest well and to use the whistle if she was afraid. Aloys confidently said she wouldn't need it and playfully stuck out her tongue. Lakshman arrived at Lisa's farm and carefully examined the scene. He found nothing but Lisa's footprints, not even chicken tracks, but he did see claw marks. He deduced that the creature must be intelligent, as it had also closed the chicken coop latch. He wondered why it would protect the chickens, but also eat them. Kian, remembering being scolded for leaving the coop unlocked before, suspected the same creature was responsible that time too. He looked at Lisa suspiciously, and she nervously admitted to having lost 3 chickens already. She promised 3 months of free eggs. Later that evening, a chicken was found, its bones buried in the ground, having been eaten. Lakshman concluded that whatever the monster was, it was both intelligent and powerful. While Lakshman and Kian were out investigating, Aloys woke up at home and realized she hadn't eaten dinner. She wondered if there were any corn chips left and heard chewing sounds as she went downstairs, worried that someone or something was eating her chips. Suddenly, she saw 2 glowing eyes in the darkness and was terrified, suspecting it might be the monster. She ran back to her room in terror, locking the door, but soon heard footsteps approaching and scratching at the door, leaving her petrified. She grabbed her emergency whistle, blew it hard, and shouted for Lakshman. Hearing the whistle, Lakshman and Kian immediately recognized it as Lentea's signal. Lakshman immediately rushed toward her house. When he arrived at Aloys' house, he anxiously called her name. A shaken Aloys appeared at the window, pointing at the creature trying to escape through the door. Seeing Lakshman, she sighed in relief, thinking how powerful the whistle was, audible even from the other side of the mountain. Lakshman told her to close the window, get into bed, and wait for him to return. As she hesitated, he gave her a stern look, immediately silencing her. Lakshman mentally scolded himself, realizing his gaze had been too harsh. A brief memory flashed. Someone bumped into him once, and just a glare from him made the person apologize on their knees. Lakshman wondered why everyone reacted so strongly to him. Kian explained that his gaze was truly frightening, the kind of look that gave people goosebumps and made them hesitant to approach him. Recently, this had made him reflect more on the darker side of being a mercenary. The more enemies a mercenary killed, the easier it was to descend into madness. The title King of Mercenaries was respected because it meant that the person had gone through countless battles and yet managed to maintain their sanity. Even the legendary Hakan, in a bloodthirsty rage, once mistook his own son for an enemy. Because of this, Lakshman remained constantly vigilant, afraid that the madness within him would one day surface. He worried that his stern demeanor had frightened Aloys, that she now saw him as a threat. As he pondered this, the sound of shattering glass erupted from inside the house. His heart leaped, and he rushed in, finding the creature already fleeing towards the backyard. He debated pursuing it himself. He was closest, after all, and figured the villagers would look after Aloys. But as he turned to leave, Aloys burst from the house and began to run. Assuming she was trying to escape, Lakshman hurried after her, only to have her stop and berate him. She angrily declared that if he had chased the monster in the first place, instead of trying to handle everything himself, they might have already caught it or at least figured out what it was. Lakshman was taken aback by her reaction, but inwardly relieved she wasn't afraid of him. As he'd feared, Aloys had cut her foot on the glass and cried out in pain. Lakshman rushed to her side. He told her to stay still as she sank to the ground. Just then, Kian arrived, and Lakshman instructed him to chase the monster into the woods. Meanwhile, Lakshman carefully examined Aloy's wound, asking if she was hurt anywhere else. She reassured him she was fine, but admitted the cut was dirty. Lakshman, feeling guilty for frightening her earlier, offered a sincere apology. He suggested she stay at his house for the night, as hers was in disarray. Still shaken, Aloy confessed that she had been truly terrified of Lakshman earlier. Lakshman apologized again for scaring her, but Aloy surprised him by asking to sleep with him, admitting she was still very afraid. Lakshman was stunned by her request. Aloy quickly explained that despite her age, she had been truly frightened when a monster scratched at her door. Slightly embarrassed, she insisted he lie beside her so she could feel safe. Relieved to finally confirm she wasn't afraid of him, Lakshman complied, not even bothering to change his clothes. Aloy nonchalantly mentioned how scared she was when the monster came near the second floor. Understanding her fear, Lakshman reassured her that he would catch the monster. Still nervous, Aloy asked if they should share a blanket. Lakshman declined. She then wondered if it was the same monster that attacked Lisa's chicken coop. Lakshman nodded, agreeing it was likely. He promised to take care of it. Aloy snuggled closer, seeking comfort, and soon drifted off to sleep. Lakshman lay there, blushing, while Aloy found solace in his presence. Warmed by his company, Aloy gradually fell asleep. After she was asleep, Lucian quietly left her room. He went to the living room, where Kian was waiting. Kian immediately asked about Aloy, and Lakshman replied that she was asleep. Kian got straight to the point, reporting the results of his pursuit. He explained that he'd followed the monster into the woods, but the dense trees and vines made it difficult. He did, however, get a clear look at its wings. Lakshman looked disapprovingly at Kian, who was sprawled in a chair. Kian quickly defended himself, saying only Lakshman could track something like that in the woods. He then revealed that he'd observed the monster's general size and discovered some important clues. He'd examined the damage at Aloy's house and found the only thing disturbed were the caramel cookies in the kitchen. Everything else, including the chickens, was untouched, leading him to believe the monster was still hungry after eating the chickens. Lucian, though somewhat frustrated, agreed it was indeed a monster and decided to prepare some traps. However, his priority was Aloy's safety, so he decided to stay with her for the time being.